Welcome to Faculty Voices. Today we have a very special guest. Aitor Bouso Gavín is a lecturer of Latinx Studies at Harvard's Ethnicity, Migration, and Rights Committee. It's known as EMR. And he is also the faculty coordinator for the Latinx Study Working Group. Welcome to Faculty Voices.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June, for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
First of all, could you describe to our listeners your own trajectory, both personally and professionally?
Yes, of course. So I recently graduated with a PhD in Hispanic Linguistics and Literatures from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I've been living in the United States for about 7 years. I first came here to teach Spanish, and I was teaching Spanish at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then I decided to pursue my graduate education. I was always very interested in literature, and I have always been very much interested in Latinx writers. I became very touched by the work of the Chicana queer writer Gloria Anzaldúa, and ever since I came across her work, I decided that I wanted to do something that was as meaningful as the kind of work that she was doing for Latinos, Latinas, queer people. And that's when I started doing research around Latinx studies, Latinx literature, and I started my PhD in the year 2019, right before the pandemic. So it was a hard journey, but I got to the end of it and I met really wonderful people. So that's how I got here. And I started as a lecturer of Latinx studies in July 2024.
Congratulations. You mentioned that you've been in the United States for 7 years, but you didn't say where you came from.
Yeah, so I came from Galicia, the northern west of Spain. My father's side is Moroccan, so that's how I connect to Latinx studies and Latinx literature. I also speak Galician, which is a minority language in Spain. So that's very much how I connect to Latinx experiences in the United States.
Okay, we're about to embark in a new era in the United States under President Donald Trump. And migration and rights are very much in the news. What do you see as the major challenges, and what kind of role can you personally, as a professor or EMR, play in confronting that new scenario?
Yeah, that's a very good question that I have been thinking a lot, particularly since the elections, since we knew about the results of the elections. And I think that Latinx studies as a discipline has always been in a middle ground where it's still not fully recognized as a discipline, right? Such as Latin American studies is recognized, or American studies can be recognized today. Latinx studies is always in that sort of muddy ground. And I believe that today Latinx studies has become very strong, and it has been become strong because of the number of particularly Latinx students who want those kind of courses. And I see that the students at Harvard really want to have those courses. So I believe that on that front, Latinx studies is going to keep growing, particularly in Harvard. The Latinx studying population and demographic at Harvard is very strong, and the students are very well organized. There are so many Latinx studies organizations. It's really a pleasure to collaborate with them, and I believe that we're going to keep doing very amazing things together. But on other fronts, I believe that Latinx studies is currently experiencing a crisis, or that I might be experiencing a crisis, because especially with the kind of anti-immigrant that we're dealing with and the anti-Latinx discourses that have been running around for now a few years, I think we're gonna have to get together and think about alternatives to deal with that and to make Latinx studies as an interdisciplinary field stronger. I feel like we definitely need to get together from various disciplines and try to keep fighting for Latinx studies and for the importance of keeping Latinx studies as a field today, sort of connecting with very different and explaining also the importance of Latinx studies, because sometimes we think about Latinx studies as something that is just for the humanities, right? But Latinx studies has a very important relevance in other fields such as the STEM fields or any other students who are STEM students really need to have that background. For instance, opening up to them the importance of indigenous knowledge and how that is really relevant within STEM. And I feel like Latinx studies and also the work that I do within Latinx studies would really help students from those fields who might think that they cannot really benefit from the kind of knowledge that you will learn in Latinx studies courses.
Uh-huh. Now, you mentioned that there are a lot of Latinx students at Harvard. As we learned in the elections, Latinx isn't all one thing. How would you describe the group here? What sort of students have you had or come into contact with?
I have had a very diverse group of students. And it's really a pleasure to see that. I have come across with students from different sort of Latin American nationalities, but also from different gender expressions and gender identities, which has been very important, especially when teaching my seminar, Queer Interventions in Latinx Studies. And I have come across the students who are very willing to know about Latinidad, but Latinidad beyond the normative conception of Latinidad, right? Many times in the United States, when we think about Latinos, we think about Mexicans, we think about Puerto Ricans, we don't think about other national and ethnic groups, right? I feel like the kind of student population that we have at Harvard, the Latinx student population, is very varied. And I'm very grateful for that and to also incorporate and give a chance to students who might not belong to the narrative of Latinidad to also see themselves represented on that Latinidad. For instance, next semester I'm going to be teaching a course on Afro Latinx studies, and I hope that is an opportunity for Black Latinx students to also see themselves be part of Latinidad and be represented as Black Latinos within Harvard. But I'm also very interested in letting or teaching or just opening up doors for other Latino, Latinx students to know about these experiences and to interrogate the colonial narratives about around Latinidad, right? Because I think that is definitely something that is at stake today within Latinx studies and that we need to continue working on.
As some of the Latinx studies, some of the Latinx students at Harvard are either undocumented or are benefiting from the DACA program, which allows people who are taken in as young children to stay in the country legally. Donald Trump has threatened to do away with that program and also has declared that he's going to massively deport people who do not have documents. As the faculty coordinator for the Latinx Studies program, are people afraid?
That is a very important question that you're making right now. And I do believe that people are very, I wouldn't know whether I don't want to say that they are afraid, but I've definitely have noticed a change in the way people have come to me, especially students, the way have they have reached out to me has definitely changed. I do see students now in need of support, in need of having faculty being supportive. And I do feel from my students that they need spaces to talk about their life, their experiences, whatever that might be, and especially Latinx students. This semester, last semester, together with the Harvard Foundation for Intercultural and Race Relations, I co-organized an EMR. We co-organized the screening of Almost American, which is a documentary about TPS holders from El Salvador and sort of their experience. And that was a very successful event, and a lot of students showed up and also talked about their families' experiences, their own experiences and anxieties. Some of them knew or their family hold TPS, and TPS, temporary protected status, was already, they tried to go, they went after it during the Trump administration, and now we don't know what is going to happen, right? We don't know if they're going to fully ban it or whether it's going to continue in the future, but the prospect is not very optimistic. And so doing that for students, I feel like it opened up to them a door, or it opened up for them a space to be comfortable within the Harvard campus and to give them a voice, but not only give them a voice, but give them support and show them that as faculty, as programs within Harvard, we are supportive of those students, of their families, and we're going to try to do whatever we can to be there for them. And I want to keep doing events, create groups, student groups, and support them. I have been very supportive of the Latinx Studies Working Groups. I believe that it is a wonderful experience, and it is wonderful for students to have those spaces to go to, because universities can be very isolating spaces, and Latinx students really need them.
Mhm. So you see the role of EMR and of yourself personally as creating safe spaces?
I do. I think that is definitely part of it. I feel like EMR has been doing that for a long time. And I believe that not only EMR, but many other programs and departments should be opening up to students, to go to them, to feel supported, to just feel not only supported, but represented, and knowing that whatever they are going through, that they can be honest about it. Because what I have experienced with a lot of Latinx students is that sometimes they do not talk about their experiences because they don't know whether they are going to be fully supported or fully understood. And I believe that is definitely the role that any sort of faculty, program, department should have towards their students, right? To give them respect, but not only respect, but help them throughout their journey at Harvard.
Is there, when you say support, is there anything practical that you see Harvard as being able to do in case these student status is threatened?
Mm-hmm. I That is something that I'm trying to learn, as I have recently joined Harvard. I've been here for a semester, and I haven't seen anything practical in that sense. But I do believe that we need to get together as faculty, as students, as we need to create a community. I feel like that's something very important that I have already witnessed, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. But I feel like that's very important for these students, and to see which, not only in supportive emotional ways, but also in which other practical ways we can be of support through community organizing and any other, and by providing resources and so on and so forth. So that's what I have witnessed, and I hope, and I'm hopeful to see other practical ways in which students can be further supported.
Of course, one of your most important roles here is as a teacher.
Yes.
And one of the courses you were teaching this semester, I was really interested in Latinx decolonial healing. And the course, as you describe it, emphasizes the decolonial practice of interrogating colonial and wounding legacies, particularly in relation to the body, bodily awareness, and spiritual consciousness, and learning to address colonial tendencies such as the neglect of the body and spirit in the process of trauma and recovery. That sounds like a really interesting course, but can you translate in terms of what it means in pertaining to everyday life today for our Latinx students or the Latinx community?
Yes, of course. I would love to expand on that. So, what this course is really about is very related to my current book project on the manifestation of wounds and decolonial healing in Latinx literature and visual arts. And what I want students to understand in this course is that through creative expression, be it literature, visual arts, or any other music, any other form of creative expression by Latinx peoples, that it is a form or is a tool to create healing, but not only healing, also social awareness, political awareness about where these wounds that Latinx peoples are experiencing in the United States come from. Many of these wounds are part of coloniality, right? And so when we think about coloniality, it is very important to think about the role of the body in all of this, right? With the cards and the Enlightenment, we were taught in any Western society that the mind and the body are separated and that there is a supremacy of the mind and anything has to there. And there's when we have the terms logic, rationality, and so on and so forth. So all the emotional, bodily, aspect of our lives is pushed to the side, right? But there are a lot of work being done on this. For instance, Vessel van der Kolk, which is a psychotherapist and who published this amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks about the fact that the harm and the wounds are stored in the body. And so they need to be released. And so creative expression is one of those avenues, right? Expressing yourself and talking about the harm is a form of letting go of it and healing. And so when Latinos and Latinx peoples are doing that, they are being very political as well because they are talking about what it means to be live in a very where it means to be racialized, where it means to be through all of those experiences. I'm also thinking about Latinos who are going through intersectional racialization, for instance, Latinos who are queer and Latinos in the United States, or Latinas as well, and sort of their experiences as women and Latinas at the same time. Also about Black Latinos, Indigenous Latinos, and Latinx, right? I think those experiences are very rooted in coloniality, and these wounds need to be expressed in order to address those problems. And I see that as a very political act. And so, what I want to do in this course is open lay for students what Latinx artists, Latinx writers have been doing in terms of creating this decolonial healing, right? And so that is pretty much what this seminar is going to be about.
So you really do see yourself as an agent for change and for self-awareness.
I would love to I would love to see myself like that, and always my priority has been to be an educator and to help my students because that's the role, that's how teachers have been for me. That's what I have experienced. And I'm deeply grateful to all of my teachers and professors and mentors. And I do believe that I wouldn't be here without them. And I want to do the same for my students in a way. And I do love that part of my job.
So you're introducing them to figures like Farrelly Bias and Bonnie Ramirez, and they talked about, maybe you could tell us who they are. They have talked about their art as a tool of survival, and you seem to see their art and that of other Afro Latinx artists as acts of resistance.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course. So Firley Baez and Bonnie Ramirez, they are two Dominican US-based visual artists. Firley Baez happens her dad is also Haitian or has Haitian ancestry. So her work is very much about the problem that has been occurring historically with the Dominican Republic and Haiti, right? Since Haiti became the first independent Black country in Latin America. So what she does with her work is she really goes deep into that, right? So she really tries to explain all the colonial wounds and all the historical trauma that she has experienced as both a Dominican but also as an Afro descendant, and how that is also very much changed by her experience living in the United States. She moved to Miami when she was with her family when she was very little. So she explains all of that in her work, and she also connects very much with Black liberation movements. So she does talk about the importance of understanding Black agency and understanding how it is a necessity today, and it is an act of resistance to go and dig all the Black history in Latin America and the United States. For instance, one her work that I have examined, for instance, an installation is one of her installations is about an underwater world of Black enslaved people who were thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. And so it's a world that it's a sci-fi kind of recreation of that world, or a decolonial imaginary of what it would be like to create a society of the babies of the women who were thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. And so this underworld world is also there are also very important figures such as Haitian priestesses who were a very important part during the Haitian Revolution and who are not recognized because they were women. So what she does is this combination of really important Black figures and how they connect. They are all interrelated to coloniality and colonial history. And I feel like her work is really amazing, and I encourage people to really check her out. And then Bonnie Ramirez, it's also a Dominican Afro-descendant visual artist based in New Jersey today. And his work is also very much linked to exploring the Caribbean, exploring Dominican people, exploring Black Dominicans. And he does that. He has a very specific aesthetic, which is he creates these bodies who are distorted and who are like very much with like distorted limbs and different colors like purple. And so that is a representation, or I read it as a representation of how the body has received all this colonial harm and how the body carries these colonial wounds. And I think his work is also really important today.
Beyond the Caribbean, what importance do Afro Latinx people have in shaping the continent and current politics?
I think it is tremendous. It is very important. The political struggles that they have been part of and that they have been part of for so many years, for centuries, since the beginning of colonization, it's really an example of how important, how they have resisted and they continue to resist systems of oppression, coloniality, and so on and so forth. And I feel like the Black people anywhere in the world, particularly in Latin America, are an example that we should look at when thinking about how to survive in very critical times like the ones that we're about to experience. And they give us, I believe that they give us an example, but I don't want to romanticize it in any way. I feel like that is the reason that they have done this is the reason why we need to take care of the rights of Black people, and why we, even though we may look at them as an example, there are still so many problems that Black people, especially in Latin America, are going through that we need to pay attention to. And I always think about the case of Colombia and Francia Marquez, the vice president. She's such an, I believe that she has done really amazing work in terms of education in Colombia, and I think that she's definitely a role model of the kind of work that Black women have been doing. And I do look at her, at the kind of work that she has done, and I feel very hopeful about the future.
That's great. Finally, returning to the subject of migration, for the migration part of EMR. I was intrigued by your article on femicide, the targeted murder of women in Mexico. There, you're using literature and visual culture as a very effective lens. You write that it is necessary to find alternatives and tools that can effectively unearth and amplify the testimonials and stories of wounded bodies. Could you explain that?
Yes, of course. So when I was writing that essay, I first came across the Juarez feminicides by reading the work, the novel of the Chicana writer Alicia Gaspar de Alba, her novel Desert Blood. And I was really affected by how she was describing the feminicides, right? So first of all, what she did in that novel was explaining to her readers that the issue of feminicide on the border, Ciudad Juarez, is not only a Mexican problem. It is actually a problem that is very much rooted in US imperialism because many of the victims of the Juarez feminicides were working in maquiladoras, so US owned factories. And the Juarez feminicide started rising in the early 1990s, which was when NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was created in 1992. So what she did to me is open up for me to understand that the Juarez feminicide is not only a Mexican problem, but it's also a US problem and it's a global problem in general. And so that I see as a tool of unearthing to begin with, right? Or really understanding the colonial impact of that and how the US is really much a part of that problem. But then and then I started doing research and I was really upset by how gruesome all the narratives about the Juarez feminicides were. And I thought that was a problem, especially for the families. And I was thinking a lot about the mothers of Juarez who has lost their daughters and the families, of course, and the friends and so on and so forth, and how their stories were not really taken a mainstream. They were not being represented in mainstream ways, right? What was being represented in really amplified ways was the gruesomeness of all of that and how it put a light on the Juarez feminicides that was actually starting to create anti-Latinx discourses, such as Mexican men are rapists, and so on and so forth. And I thought that there were other works that were being done that were doing the opposite and that were actually creating some sort of healing for those families. And so in this essay, I talk a lot about the documentary Señorita Extraviada by Lourdes Portillo, who was a Chicana filmmaker, sadly passed away recently. And she was really opening up her documentary to give a voice to the mothers and to the families who had lost their daughters. And so what I do a lot in my essay is focus on how these mothers are expressing that harm and how they are expressing that pain. And by creating these testimonials, these first about their lived experiences, they were creating some sort of healing, of collective, of a sense of collectivity for these mothers. And I felt like that's one of the parts that needed to be unearthed in terms of the Juarez feminicides and all the work that grassroots organizations were doing to fight against the Juarez feminicides. And I think that's really about creating subaltern knowledge about these feminicides. And that's what I mean by digging deeper within the Juarez feminicides and the work that is being done. So that's what the essay was about.
So we've talked today about femicides and deportation and various other challenges. What are you optimistic about?
Again, I'm very happy to continue working with my students, and I do see my work with my students as something that is not only enriching for me, but that I believe is enriching for them. And I see that hopeful in the way that my courses, through my work with the students, I am also trying to reach out more to the Latinx community in Boston, in the Boston area. Through that kind of work, I do see that it's going to be change. And I feel like now we're at a time that we need that work more than ever. And I believe that from times like this, from critical times like this, we can get really effective changes. I'm thinking a lot about the Black Lives Matter movement and what that meant. So I see this moment that is going to be very hard for many of us as a moment where we need to get together and where we need to continue the struggle and continue fighting.
Thank you very much. You've been listening to Faculty Voices. Aitor Bouso Gavín is a lecturer of Latinx Studies at Harvard's Ethnicity, Migration, Rights Committee, where he is also the faculty coordinator for the Latinx Studies Working Group. Thank you for joining Faculty Voices.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.